Welcome everyone to our webinar today, How to Write a Business Plan. We are the North Metro Small Business Development Center, and this session is sponsored by the City of Westminster. So we want to give a big shout out and thank you to our partners there. And they have some great resources on their website that is in the chat actually. So you can check out all the events they have coming up and the great resources they have all the time. So just a few housekeeping items before we get into content today. We really like for these sessions to be interactive, so you can type in any questions you have into your GoToWebinar panel there. There's a questions tab. We'll get to some of those throughout the session, and then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end as well. So today we are joined by John Henry. He's one of our SBDC lead consultants and has years of experience in the business world. So we're really happy to be learning from him today. So John, I will let you introduce yourself a bit.
Okay, thank you, Hannah. As Hannah indicated, my name is John Henry. I am the lead consultant here at the North Metro Small Business Development Center. Have been for 10 years now. And today our goal is to help you through the business planning process, which can be daunting at times, depending on your background and knowledge of the business world, and at the same time provide you some advice and counsel in accomplishing this. Before getting into the subject matter, I feel it's in order for me to give you a little background on myself, so you know that I just didn't stumble in here to get out of the rain today. And several years ago, I was discharged from the Army, honorably, I might add, and it was 6 weeks away from my wedding date and out of a job. And spoke to a friend of mine who was working at UPS at the time, and it coincidentally was October this time of year, and I asked him about whether they were hiring or not. He indicated they were. I went over, interviewed, got a job as a driver at UPS, and stayed with them for 15 years. And during that course of my career there, I moved up through the ranks, supervisor, manager, other assignments, one of which was in the upstate New York area. A few years into my management career, I was involved in the planning team, which expanded their service into upstate New York. Prior to that time, UPS only operated in the 5 boroughs. So in that job or that position, I was assigned to the Syracuse division and stayed there with them for about 7, 8 years, and then moved on to Northern Ohio, where I had a similar job in operating out of Cleveland. And like a lot of jobs, you might be experiencing that. I know I speak to a lot of clients who give as a reason for starting their own business that they're not necessarily burned out, but they're due for a change. And I was at that point in my career where I was sort of getting, I guess you could say, bored or disinterested, and as several of people at UPS were at the time. And I'm not going to go into that. They're a great company, and I think they're wonderful at what they do. But I got a call from a friend of mine, who ex-UPSer who had left and was living now in Florida. And he told me that there's a company starting up down in, actually it was starting in Little Rock, Arkansas, which later moved over to Memphis, Tennessee, shortly before the opening, a company called Federal Express. So I thanked him, and he told me that one of the fellows that used to work for me at one time in Syracuse was on board with them as the VP of Sales and Operations. So by him, Mike Bash. So I went down, called Mike, set up an appointment, went down, interviewed, subsequently left UPS, went to work at FedEx. Spent about 12 years with FedEx. My first assignment there were 5 of us from UPS who had moved over and left our jobs and went to work at Federal Express, as it was called in the early days. 3 of us were charged with putting together the operating plan for the first 25 cities that they opened up. And this was sort of a massive undertaking when you think of the geography. It was just about every major city east of the Mississippi. So as I said, I stayed there for a number of years. And my last assignment at FedEx was the opening of the Canadian operation. I was the first expatriate employee. I was selected to lead the team to open the country of Canada, which we did in the 80s, and opened 9 cities all in one day. Again, similar to the initial opening with FedEx. After a couple of years in Canada, I again assessed my situation, determined that it was time for me to move on. And I shook hands with FedEx, and we parted friends, and another FedEx fellow and myself got together and put together another startup here in Colorado in the similar business, overnight, next day, same day, 2-hour service, all along the Front Range of Colorado. And at around that time, I also got involved teaching here at Front Range Community College as an adjunct instructor in the business school. And a couple of courses, along with basic supervision and management courses, a couple of courses I taught were small business management and entrepreneurship. So having said all that, that gives you a little feel for my experience in the startup area. And the one thing I always enjoyed with the startups was something new, it was challenging, and it sort of it was exciting. You could see your results, and it sort of pushed you a little bit to do your best work and setting the program up at the outset. So today, having said all that, again, our goal here is to give you some insights in the business planning area and help you simplify the process. Before we start, I'd just like to comment on some of the things I hear from folks who are in your positions. If you're a startup or if you're already in business, you may have gone through this. But when we initially speak to clients, there are a few things that we go over with them. If you want to call them the legal requirements, the selection of a trade name, and registering with the state of Colorado, your business form, whether you select the LLC or sole proprietorship, getting your EIN, and all those things. And along with that, once we've gone through that list, I bring up the subject of business plan. And surprisingly, a lot of folks are sort of intimidated by putting together a business plan. They feel overwhelmed. They don't know where to start, or their comments are, wow, that's a big report, and I probably have to do pie charts and graphs and spreadsheets and all that. And you can or you cannot, depending. And as most of you probably are aware, that if you're going to be relying on lenders to help you with the financing, they're going to require that you do have a business plan. So one of the things I try to get across is really this isn't that intimidating. And I like to go back to when I was a kid in high school, my freshman year. I remember we had a public speaking class, and I had never, grade school, we didn't have public speaking courses. You're always concerned about, wow, it's going to be, you're going to be nervous, and how's this going to come off and whatnot. And the teacher was sharp enough to make the first assignment a speech that we had to give, telling about what we did that previous summer. And that was like a piece of cake because it was something we experienced. We talked about where we went. If we went out of town, we went somewhere with our families, what we do with our friends and all that. And it made it a lot easier to just express your feelings about this particular topic. And the same thought applies here, because when you look at it, if you feel intimidated, you're just telling your story. This is what you want to do. This is what you selected as a new enterprise for yourself, a new career, if you will. And if you look at it in that light, it just makes it a lot easier. So having said all that, we want to move on and talk about some of the things that go into the business plan itself and why it's important.
Yes, yeah, thank you, John. That is really interesting. I didn't know all of your background and history, and we're just very fortunate to have you on our consulting team. And I know this is a question you get a lot from clients wondering, you tell me to get a business plan, how do I start that? So that's what we're going to go over. These are some of the components we're going to cover today. Obviously, why is it important? What are the things that need to go into a business plan? And then at the end, we're going to talk about some more resources that you can use after today's session. And a lot of this actually comes from the SBA website. There are some video tutorials that will actually walk you through each of these components that we're going to talk about that are like 30 seconds to a couple minutes each. So they're really short and digestible. So that's going to be really helpful. We'll show you where to find that on the website, as well as some other helpful resources. So first, we'll start with why is a business plan important?
Okay, as you see on the slide here, it says use your business plan as a roadmap, for how to structure, run, and grow your new business. And we'll go into detail a little on that roadmap item here in a few minutes. But keep in mind, if you look at the second item, investors want to feel confident they'll see a return on their investment. Well, you might say to yourself, well, I don't need investors. I have sufficient funding on my own, or I have some family money or friends or private funding that I'm going to use to start my business. But the business plan is more than just an investment situation. And really what comes as a third point, it illustrates there, everything comes back to your business plan. And it does several things for you. Number one, it provides the framework and the direction of your business. It declares your vision, your mission, what you're intending to do, the reason for being, if you will, of the business. And it defines the end result. And this is important because you have to have a target or a goal that you're shooting for, what you're looking to accomplish. And again, in the business plan, you'll provide the best plan to achieve that goal, and we'll go through and they'll give you the roadmap to get there. And that's the point I was making earlier, that the roadmap, we'll use that illustration or example because when you think about it, you're at point A and you want to get to point B, and the business plan is going to explain and illustrate the steps you have to take to get there. Excuse me. So if we move ahead, we're going to look at a slide that talks about common mistakes. And you say, well, this is sort of negative, isn't it? And I agree, it is. But this is a good news, bad news story, okay? And whenever I'm given that option, someone says, well, John, we got good news and bad news. I always say, give me the bad news first. And then the upside is that you then get the good news and you want to finish on a high note. So some of the bad news is the failure rate. Small businesses overall, and this is time tested, not just recently tainted or colored by the pandemic we're in, but as a rule, 20% of the small businesses do not survive the first year. By the end of the fifth year, 50% have sort of fallen by the wayside or are no longer in existence. And at the end of 10 years, about a third, 1 out of 3 of the original startups are still active, okay? And again, if you look off to the side there, the source for this is the Entrepreneur magazine, February of 2004. That hasn't changed. This is pretty much constant over the years, as I indicated. Recently, in putting together some thoughts for our little session here this morning, I was familiar with the reasons for failure and having taught small business management here, but just to make sure that things hadn't changed in the last few years, I went on Investopedia, which is similar to Wikipedia, and back as far as March of this year, the reasons for failure in order were: number one, lack of working capital or running out of money, not having enough funding at the startup, okay? Secondly, the second reason that businesses fail is failure to have a good management team. And sometimes you say, well, team, I'm a one-person operation here, and I really don't intend to have a team at the outset. I won't be able to afford a team. And I think most of the things that need to be done in the business I can do myself. Well, sometimes that turns out to be a fallacy because we can't do it all. We wear all the hats when we own the business, okay? Having gone through this with my partner, I can speak from experience. And we have our strengths and weaknesses. And if it's an area that we're weak in or not strong in, let's say, whether it be marketing or sales or accounting or whatever, management is hard to outsource. But you want to outsource this, take advantage of folks who have the expertise in that area. And that's one of the things that we provide here at the Small Business Development Center. We have folks that are experienced in all the different elements of the business. And they're available. You can contact Hannah here or go online and go on our site and look at the resources and the team that's out there to help you. So that's the second one. And again, failure to delegate is part of that management failure. Third reason why businesses fail is ineffective business planning. And that's why we're here today. And then the fourth one, even I don't want to go through the whole list, but keep in mind, this is current. This is something that just made the list here in the last decade or so. The fourth reason is a lack of demand for the product or service. There's no need for it. And a lot of times people make the mistake of coming up with a great idea and saying, man, I think this would really sell and we could be successful. And the problem is, well, that's good that you feel that way, but does the market agree with you? And again, there's an old saying, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So it's a matter of how the marketplace is going to perceive your idea and whether they feel it's something they need and that they're willing to purchase, okay? So now let's get into the other common mistakes that lead up to these failure items, if you will. So we get the negative stuff out of the way on the front end. But at the same time, I want to make you aware of the things that we need to do in our business planning so we don't come back and make some of the mistakes we see on the board here. Failure to spend time enough research to see if it's viable. I think we just touched on that. Miscalculating the market size, the timing, ease of entry. And by ease of entry, the barriers to entry. Sometimes it's money. You need a certain amount of money for your startup, depending on the size of it and the outlay. Sometimes it's regulatory barriers. There's certain laws that you have to provide, some compliance regulations that you need to abide by. It could be educational. You need a certain degree. You need a license to operate, and part of the licensing procedure is that you have a degree in a specific a specific area of expertise. Underestimating financial requirements, we just hit on that. Number one common mistake. Again, going down the list, over projecting sales and buy, be a little too optimistic and saying this is going to happen this quickly when in reality it's not, probably will not. Underestimating your costs, making sure, and this is pretty easy to do. The marketing side is always a little tougher, and we'll talk about marketing here for the elements. But on the cost side, you have a pretty good feel. If you're going into a business, chances are you've got experience in that field, and you know what it costs to put this product together and offer this service and go on and do whatever you intend to do. Lack of contingency plan, plan B. What happens in the case of a pandemic? I just saw on the news the other night, the city of Denver is again, a lot of restaurants are applying for outdoor seating. So now that the weather's turning on us, and a lot of them are still going to have to operate outdoors through the winter period, winter months. And as a result, they have to have the healthy and safe premises that'll require. Again, looking too much on sales problem, company price rather than profit. And profit's where it's at. The profit ratio is the leading indicator on how successful the business is. You might be doing, a good example is the supermarket industry. And I used to discuss this in our business classes. Believe it or not, the supermarket industry is one of the least profitable in terms of ratio of any business out there. In fact, it is the number one. And you can go online, check this out. You can go on the sites of all the leading companies, Kroger and Safeway and the rest of them. And their percentage, their margin of profit is like between 1% and 2%. So if you visualize, you're going to the supermarket on a Saturday, loading up the basket, you check out, the bill is $200. They're going to make like between $2 and $4 on that sale purchase. But you say, well, how can they be successful? Well, because they do volume. And without the volume, that's why a lot of the the mom and pop stores are out of business. We don't see them in the neighborhoods anymore. For those of you that are as ancient as I am, when we had them done every few blocks, so we didn't have a lot of supermarkets. Moving on, lacking simplicity. You might have heard the expression KISS, keep it KISS, keep it simple, stupid is the connotation there. And that's something that we have to bear in mind, that we're not trying to solve all the problems on the front end. Our focus is to get the business going, get it up and running, and having a plan as to how we're going to grow it over time. So keep it simple, and then lacking focus and identity. Again, I just mentioned the focus. Okay, focus on the short term, and make sure you cover all the bases. Don't get distracted, and you'll have a lot better chance of becoming successful.
John, a quick question. I think this makes it pretty obvious how important a business plan is, and that every business does need a business plan. But at what point should I be doing my business plan? Should I be generating some sales and getting my feet under me a little bit, or should it be the first thing I do before I even start?
You just answered your question. Thanks, that's a good question. You want to get this done well in advance. Because one of the things we're going to talk about when we get to the financial area is startup expense schedule. And I'm alarmed, having taught those classes for a few years, that in all the texts that we use, and it was probably half a dozen, because we tend to change it every year or two, there was never a mention of what they call a startup expense schedule. And that's the amount of money that you need, the expenses or the expenditures, the money you're going to lay out at startup prior to opening the doors. So you have to take into consideration all the things that you need to purchase. If you're running square footage or property, usually you need 3 months first, last, and a security deposit. So that has to be added into the equation. So it's important that you do it up front, because then you'll know how much money you need, and then you can say, well, I need X. I don't have X, I have Y, so now I have to go to the outside, and it might be personal, folks, friends, family, whatever, and as a last resort, if necessary, you go to the bank.
Sure.
So it's in answer to your question, which you did at the end of your statement, you always want to have it done up front. And I always think of the saying that says, when you're up to your waist in alligators, it's too late to remember that your objective was to drain the swamp. So I think that applies pretty aptly here.
Yeah, great. Thank you. That's really helpful. So moving on to components. John will go through each of these in a little bit more detail. And again, these are all listed on the SBA website that we'll show you at the end as well. That gives a little summary of each, but John will give us some more in-depth background on each of these components.
Okay, thanks, Anna. What you see here is 10 components, I believe. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, there are only 6 actual elements or sections, if you will, of the business plan. And we'll get through each of them in detail. And I'm going to point out here that, with the exception of the executive summary, the funding request, third from the bottom, and the appendix, last item, all the other 6 are actual elements of the plan. Okay, and because they're in this order, we're going to look at the executive summary first. And it says here, briefly tell your reader what the company is about, why it will be successful. And it's a snapshot of the plan itself. And the reason it's up front here, and if you consider the word summary, well, we're summarizing what we're going to do. And the reason for that is, if you're going to go to the bank and speak to a lender, they're going to give you 20, 30 minutes at a time. And if you have a 15 to 20 page plan, or even a 5 to 10 or whatever, he or she is not going to have the time to go through that. So what you want to do here is what in 1 to 2 pages, list the highlights of each element, and that being the product or service. Info about your leadership team, if it's a larger, more than 1 or 2 folks. Talk also about the employees you're going to have, where you're going to locate, and so on. And it gives them a little bit of an idea, and then there'll be a Q&A based on the questions they have in their mind about what you're presenting to them. And of course, lastly, the amount of funding required and the terms, and that's a matter of how you're going to pay it back. In the company, I'm sorry, let's back up just one I skimmed over. Under product and service, you want to talk in there about who your market is, who your customers are, who you're selling to, okay? So they have a feel for what folks would be prone to purchase whatever service or product that you're going to present to the market.
John, another quick question. How formal should I be in my writing, my description? Of course, I want to be professional, but do you have any opinion or advice on what tone of voice I should be taking when writing this?
That's a good question. And actually, I don't like to get too flowery with my prose, if you will. I've read several business plans, and the ones that I remember the most are in excess of 20 pages, sometimes 25, once almost 30. And the problem with it was that there was a lot of repetitive sentences in there, or statements embellishing the company as if this was the first thing that the sliced bread to come down the pike, as they say. And really what you want to do is just make your point and be direct about it. You don't have to get too professional. And it's not something that's being presented to a professor for a grade at a university, but you want to just make it matter of fact. Again, here's what we're accomplishing. Here's what we're attempting to accomplish, and here's how we intend to go about doing that, okay?
Great, thank you.
You bet. Mission statement, it's the expression of business, okay? You can and or cannot make a mission statement. I think it's good to have one. A lot of companies have this, they publicize it if they have a newsletter within the company that comes out on a weekly, monthly basis. You'll see that mission statement in the masthead of the newsletter. I've been in companies where they have this on a plaque in the reception area. If you're visiting on a sales call or whatever, and you see it displayed, that this is our mission statement. In other words, this is what we're trying to accomplish in life. Problems your business solves, the need it fulfills. Do you have something that's bigger, better, less expensive? What's your appeal going to be to the marketplace? Who your customers are, briefly let's touch on that, and we'll go into more detail later in the marketing area. Your credibility, important. Usually you won't find someone that's been a plumber all their life that's going to open a massage parlor or a beauty parlor. So they want to know that if you have what the banker or the lender is going to want, going to question or make sure you're knowledgeable in this area, that you have a background, you have experience, and in other words, you know what you're doing. So you're not going into something blind. And then the rest of the et cetera, goals, objectives, and in there you just want to be as specific as you can and make sure that the goals you set are attainable. Okay, service and product line. Okay, now we're getting into the guts of the plan. Okay, we went through the company description. We've explained who we are, what we're all about, and now describing what you sell and what you service. What service you offer. You want to talk about pricing. The important features of your product. Is it user-friendly? Is it state-of-the-art? Anything along those lines which will help clarify that and expand on a little bit. How does it benefit your customer? How does it fill their needs? Is it something that they need? Again, let's go back to the point I mentioned earlier. Number 4, the fourth reason that businesses fail, because a lot of times people come out and they make a nice product or provide a service, but nobody really wants to buy it, or a limited amount of people do, and not enough to make it profitable for you. So keep that in mind. You have to, you're not designing this company or building this company to suit yourself. You're doing it to fulfill your needs in the marketplace, okay? The needs of the marketplace. What is your competitive advantage? If you got something that's unique, you're in the catbird seat. You got a big leg up, as they say. Great advantage, okay? Is your competitive advantage along the pricing lines? Is it something you can offer lower than any competition that's out there? Is it a product that's more efficient? Is the quality better than what people are experiencing now? And over the years, we all know that quality has slipped tremendously. And in order to keep prices in line, companies tend to cut down on the quality. And then service after the sale, which is important, okay? Doesn't apply in all cases, but you want to make sure that you're available to your customers in the event that they have a question or some sort of a problem with your service or product, okay? Intellectual property naturally is any rights that you own along the lines of copyrights or patents, okay? Okay, market analysis. You need a good, so you need a good understanding of your industry and the target market, okay? Down the left side, customer research, benefits of your product, we just talked about that. Who are your customers? And in doing your market analysis, you need to segment the market, okay? You can't be all things to all people. And what you're selling is not something that everyone has a need for or is willing to buy. So in order to target your marketing, you want to make sure that you appeal to that demographic base, whether it be age, gender, median income, whatever it might be. These are the folks that we've identified. Of all the people out there, this is the 15 to 20% niche that we're aiming to serve, okay? Where are your customers? Are you going to be local? Most startups are, or you could be regional at some point. The business becomes national, and you're selling it across the country, and in some cases, perhaps internationally, okay? How do you reach your customers? Always a good question, and one of the most critical questions, I think, which I want to digress back to this meeting with the lender and talking about the 6 elements. And the 2 elements, I've had I guess the honor, or whatever you want to call it, the opportunity to go to the bank with some clients who felt a little nervous about sitting down with a banker and having them ask questions about, the banker ask questions about the client's business plan. So I said, well, would you like me to go? And I did. And I noticed the things that the bankers will always sort of bore in on two items. They target the marketing side and the financial side. So number one, in the marketing side, they want to make sure that you've identified just what we're talking about on this particular slide, that you've identified your customers, you know who they are, and that in this particular case, you know how to reach them, okay? And then we'll get into the financial side, which is the other element that they spend a lot of time focusing on. So how do you reach your customers? There's several media channels out there. Of course, we all know the hot one today is social media, and it's the least expensive. Most startups certainly take advantage of social media. If you can afford a website, at the outset, very advisable, very important, and it really gives you some identity, if you will. So that's something you really want to do if it's in your budget, okay? And then outside, beyond the social media, there's various forms of advertising, it's print media, whatever. Personal sales, where you go directly to your customers and sit down face to face and make your pitch to try to sell your product. Direct mail, which usually doesn't apply at this level, but it is something to be aware of. At some point, it might enter into the mix, and you might want to go to direct mail or junk mail, if you will, as it's referred to, okay? Targeting customers versus business, different approaches here. I'm sorry, targeting consumers. But the consumer, naturally, you're talking to folks like ourselves here, and we have different needs and different budgets and approaches or mental approaches to this buying process, as opposed to businesses who might be more budget conscious, and they have, depending on the size of the business, they have some clout. If they can give you volume, they expect a discount in return. So these are the things that you're going to do on the research end. And then the competitors on the right side, you want to know who your competitors are, and you want to know about them, know what they do well and what they do not so well, and then capitalize on the successful. On the second one, as it says, why are they successful? Know what they do well. And then can you do it better? And if by all means, if you can, you want to make sure you do so. So, having covered that.
John, just
yes.
another question still on this. You mentioned customers and competitors. Should I also include anything about partners, like other organizations that I will collaborate with? Would that go in this section? Or?
That's a good point. Very good point. Yes, by all means. You'll see from time to time companies collaborate in their marketing. Also, you'll see commercials where there's this commercial on TV. There's a cereal product, and you'll see it mentioned in the same way. You'll have athletes or celebrities that are enjoying the cereal or tasting the product, and you'll find out there might be a clothing manufacturer or a sporting apparel company that's also jointly marketing that. So you want to have some appeal there because it's nice to, and you'll see. I know I always when I see FedEx commercials, I'm very alert to the fact that you see FedEx mentioned in a lot of different places, which is really smart marketing, and it's very reasonable to the point where it's almost free. So it's good. It's good partner.
Great, thank you.
You bet.
All right.
Okay, moving on to the organization management. Okay, and again, I say, well, I'm a 1 or 2 person startup, and we're not going to have an org chart because I'm going to be taking care of most of the management items, or myself and my partner. But in any event, that's the case. But sometimes you'll be at the point where you're going to have maybe half a dozen, even 10 people to start up. So it's important that we take a look at this. First thing we look at is describing the legal structure, and that's the choice we have between whether we go with a sole proprietorship, whether we go with an LLC, limited liability company, or with an S corp. And the S corp, very similar to the limited liability company, actually was the forerunner of the LLC, which came on board around 1990. Prior to that, the S corp was the most favorable form of business that business people would select in order to protect their personal assets. And we won't go into a lot of detail here. There's a lot of information on site, resources that you can go through. And we also have staff here that can help you if you have any questions on this. Operating plan. Org chart, important again, as I said, if you have that many folks. And along with that, part of the org chart is the operations plan. And again, this is an area that you don't see a lot of mention when you go into the text as to what the operations plan is within an org chart. They don't talk about the details. And the things you want to know when you're putting the org chart together, along with that is the operating plan, which in essence says, well, how's this machine going to run? Who comes to work? What time do they come to work? And what do they do when they get there? Included with job descriptions where there's some accountability. So you want to go into a little detail there to make sure that you've thought it all through and know that, yes, I need 5 people or 6 people or 3 people. I need 2 shifts. My hours of operation should be, early morning to mid-afternoon, or 10 hours a day, 12 hours, whatever the case may be. Okay? So these are all things that you want to take a look at. Suppliers and outside help, very important. You want to look at who your vendors are going to be. And also outside help covers things like accountants, HR consultants, lawyers, IT specialists, marketing folks. These are all, again, things I alluded to earlier, where if you don't have the the experience and the background, you don't feel worthy of doing all this on your own, it's important that you outsource it and get some professional help and make sure that it's done in the best manner that it can, okay?
So John, if I am just starting and it's just me doing everything, so I am your charge, should I be forecasting ahead to the employees I would hope to be hiring and the roles they would be filling in the next year or so as I grow? Or is it just a snapshot of how my business is operating at this time?
No, good question. And the answer is yes, you should be looking forward. This isn't just a startup. Again, I apologize if I didn't make that clear. But we're looking at a 1 year, 3 year, 5 year term, okay? So you want to be looking at, well, here's what we project in terms of growth. This is how much revenue we see ourselves having after a year, which means that we're going to have to hire 1 or 2 more of these people, or another sales rep, or someone else that's in the processing department, or whatever the case might be, okay?
Great.
Okay, moving on, marketing and sales. Again, we talked earlier about market analysis, and that's the research end of it. Now this is the actual sales plan, marketing and sales plan, which the first question is, describe how you will attract and retain customers. We talked about segmenting the market and targeting. And at the end here, Hannah will make you aware of a good resource here in the Denver area that you might want to look into, which can be very helpful in doing this. Good market information is hard, very difficult to come by in a local business. Nationally, where companies are public companies, there's a lot more information available. But when you're dealing on the startup level or in the small business arena, it's very difficult to come up with good hard marketing data. Okay, under the advertising and promotional plan, I think I touched on all these before. Couple of things there at the end we didn't cover: public relations and trade shows. Okay, and public relations is sort of a gift, and I don't see a big opportunity for it at the startup level, but sometimes there will be something there where there's business information that the media feel is important for the public to know about. So if there's a promotion, or a lot of times you read about a certain company moving to town. It's very popular here in the Broomfield area. Out here in Interlocking, we see a lot of things written about those types of transactions. Or someone gets promoted within the company, become a VP or president, or director of the marketing or accounting department, whatever. They make what they call a press release, and that gets distributed out to all the radio, TV stations, and newspapers in the area. So that's sort of just getting your name out there in front of the public, and there's no cost for it. Again, it's relatively obscure at our level of things we're talking about. Trade shows, if it's appropriate, naturally take advantage of that and make a presence at these trade shows, because it can be a big boon for developing new customers. Okay, perhaps the most important, or if not, right up there neck and neck with the marketing analysis, the market research where we do our homework, is funding request. Clearly explain how much funding you need over the next 5 years and what you're going to use it for, okay? You want debt or equity. Debt is preferable, something that you can, debt is debt. We all know what that is. Mortgages, car loans. We're making a business loan, we're going to pay it off, and we're not giving up any equity in the company. In some cases, in the traditional lending scenario, you won't see this as an option. But if you go to the private side and you have to, maybe it's a friend or a public lender, this is the boom, if you will, of the venture capitalists. When the venture capitalists lend money, they want part of the business in return. And I can go back to FedEx, which was the largest venture capital introduction up until that time, back in the 70s. And in that case, in order to raise the money they need, Fred Smith, the founder, went out to the banking community and investment community and applied or appealed for their help, and in all cases, when someone gives a percentage, they give you, they lend you or actually invest. It's not a loan, actually. It's an investment of a certain amount of capital. They then, in return, get a certain percentage of the company based on that. So let's just use a sample, easy example. If you need $1 million to start a company, and you go out to a lender or investor, and they say, we'll give you 100,000. In turn, they get 10% of the company. And that's there forever until you buy them out of that. So that's the equity side. And you really don't want to do that if you can help it, because if you have faith in what you're doing, you know that 10,000 or 100,000 today could be worth $1 million or 10 million 5-10 years down the road. And again, I get back to FedEx, which is a perfect example of how that company grew. So you don't want to give up any of that ownership. You want to retain that if you can. The terms, short term, long term, 1 year, is a short term. Intermediate is anywhere from 2 to 10 years, and longer than that is beyond 10 years. This is the financing as you get for things like mortgages, vehicles, heavy equipment, etc. Also, I should get back and mention in the short term, included in that 1 year is a LLC or letter of credit, where it's sort of like a revolving line of credit. And if you have a shortfall on your cash flow and you get in the cash crunch and you just need to get through a period, which a lot of companies just experienced here since March of 2020, they're coming out of it now. But in order to get them through that period, they needed some short-term funding, so they did it on a letter of credit, which is something that's paid off within 30, 60, 90, 100 days, 180 days, whatever. Like the time, of course, the shortest you can afford. Funds to buy equipment, I've alluded to that as a long term. And in making your request to the bank, you want to explain to them, well, here's what we need, and you're going to provide them, as you're going to see here in the next slide with your financial projections of the things that go into that total that you're asking for, that amount of money that you're asking for. Okay. Future strategic plan of payment. Not a big deal here. Some point you might think, well, if we're successful, we're going to go public, and we're going to really make some money with this investment. So you want to project your net worth, what the value of the company will be at some point in time. Again, before we move on, I should have mentioned at the outset on this slide, the funding request is not an element or a section of the business plan. It's usually in the form of a cover letter that goes with the business plan, so that when you meet with the lender, the funding request says, this is what we want to borrow, this is what we're going to use it for, and this is how we intend to pay it back. Okay, now we get down to the nitty-gritty. Supplement your funding request with the financial projections, okay? And that create that startup expense schedule is something that's, as I mentioned earlier, is overlooked when you go online and look at the textbooks. You won't find this a lot of times. But as I mentioned earlier, it's very critical, and it's important, because unless and it's very simple to do. You just take a 8.5-11 tablet and just make a list down the left side and say, these are all the things we have to spend money on. We have to have that 3 months rent I alluded to. We need to have inventory. We have to have furniture. We have to have shelving, showcases, a vehicle, whatever. You're going to have your marketing expenses up front, your legal fees, your accounting fees. Put all these items down the left, and then right next to each one, write a number. This is how much we're going to need for each of them. Total it up, and then include in that the working capital that you're going to need to get you through the break-even period, which is another subject for another day, but usually that's 3 to 6 months out. So you want to include in there sort of a cushion, or the working capital that you will have in the bank to get you through that period until you reach that point where you're actually making money, and that your revenue is exceeding your expenses. Okay, so these are pretty simple. Last 5 years, if you've been in business, you provide the following statements, and you see them all there. Cash flow, and we're going to address the same ones again down below, and I'll talk about cash flow. And then for the next 3 to 5 years going forward, assuming if you haven't been in business, this is what you're going to need: income statement, balance sheet, capital expenditure budgets, and then third item, cash flow statement. Okay, when you go to the bank, the banking protocol, the accepted policy is they will require a cash flow projection or cash flow budget for the first 24 months. So the first 2 years, you're going to do cash flow statement on a monthly basis. And then in the third through the 5th year, depending on the bank, they might require an annual of just once a year. They may only require it for the 3rd year, or they might require quarterlies. But you can almost guarantee that you'll be required 24 months up front on a monthly basis. And it's easy to understand why, because we don't want to wait till 6 months or a year down the road to find out we're broke. We want to go month to month and say, well, we're hitting our targets, we're doing well, or on the opposite side, we're not, and we have to adjust. So that's why the banks want us to do it on a monthly basis. Okay?
And I do want to just interject real quick. I think often hear from, like in our courses, we hear from clients saying, I don't know how to do my projections. How am I supposed to know how to forecast? And we have consultants that can help you understand what these different, income statements, balance sheets, cash flow statements, what all of that is, and can also help you understand how to accurately make your projections and forecasts.
Exactly. Okay, coming down the home stretch here. The appendix. Again, not an element, but it's important that you include this in the business plan, okay? Provide supporting documents or other materials. Things like testimonials, letters from previous customers or clients that are sort of shows appreciation in your profession or your city or in your particular business. Any published articles, if you have been for something you might have accomplished or something you might have created or invented in the trade, and you can find us in the trade magazines particularly, where you've had an article that's been published. Again, it lends to your credit, it adds to your credibility. Your resume naturally, pictures of the product, letters of reference from folks to say yes. For instance, we would certainly buy this product or this service if it comes on the market, becomes available. Any license that is required in the business to execute the business, permits naturally, patents, legal documents, and other contracts, and things like memberships in committees, where you might have been on a committee in a business or in a business setting, or in the local community where you're on an economic development committee or something along those lines to expand the tax base or whatever the case might be. And these things, fundraisers, again, is something that if you've been involved in that, you want to make that apparent. And these things sort of, they help show signs of leadership and the accomplishments that you've made along the way.
Great. Well, thank you. That was great. We are going to go over a few resources, but while I look at, we're going to show you where you can find all this on the SBA website. Feel free to type in any questions. I know we're getting close to the top of the hour, so feel free to type those in while we look at these resources, if you have any for John. And I will also mention that John is available for consultations through the SBDC. So if you're not familiar with those consultations, they're free appointments where we can walk through some of your questions and guide you through this process if that's where you're at in your business. So let's see if you're still seeing, 1 second here. Like I mentioned, the SBA website, we'll look at right there, is really helpful for these types of questions. So this is just the main homepage. If you come to Business Guide, which is this first tab here, and then down to Write Your Business Plan, you'll see a lot of the, well, really all of the components that we talked about today, right? Oh.
And if you don't mind, let me interrupt just for a second, Hannah. And when you do that on the site, you'll see traditional business plan, and then prior to that, it's a selective business plan. So the two selections we have, choices we have, traditional on the left, lean on the right. The traditional is the one we just went through in detail, and that's the one that you're going to, you see the last sentence, lenders and investors commonly requested, and more than commonly, they almost always do. So you're going to need that. However, on the other side, the lean startup plan basically achieves the same thing, but on a smaller basis. Very easy to do. You can do it in a couple of hours, but it just asks a lot of the same types of questions, and it might be something that's a lot simpler for you to do. And if you go down a little lower, prior to this, we saw two types of plans that referenced a gal and a guy here. Here we go, Rebecca's plan and Andrew's plan. And each of those is an example, as it says above, of the two types of plans, both the traditional and the lean, okay?
Great. Yes, thank you. So these are just some brief descriptions of a lot of what we went over already, so you can access all of that. And another really helpful place, again, this was just under business guide and then write your business plan. But you can also come over here to learning platform and then the learning center. And this very first one, plan. And this gives you, how to write a business plan. This gives you, just like I was mentioning, real short snippets of some of these different components that we talked about. So if you are, if you learn best through videos, this is a great option for you. So just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of this resource within the Learning Center on the SBA website. And another really great resource we want to share is called BizBoost, which you're looking at now is just the form to request an appointment. This is a service through the Denver Public Library, but it is available statewide. They are virtual appointments, so you don't need to be located in Denver. You do need a library card, but you can also get those online. And you can make appointments with business librarians who will spend an hour of their time doing market research for your business, and then we'll meet with you and talk through the research that they found, and we'll then also show you how to continue your own market research through their databases. And it's incredible just the amount of information that you have access to through some of those databases. So we really encourage this BizBoost program as well, and it's free as well. So some really great resources to take advantage of. And those are all, the links to these are on the slides, which we will be sending out. Oh, this is probably wrong. We'll just go to the very last one here. The SBA website is there, the video tutorials is there, the examples of the plans, and to meet with a business consultant right there. So, I'm sorry, a business consultant and also a business librarian. You have all of those options. So I'll just check the questions real quick again. Just a couple thank yous. So you're very welcome to everyone who's listening, and thank you so much, John. This was really helpful, and I know it's so important to all of our businesses. So again, we really encourage everyone to book an appointment with John or any of our other business consultants. I'll include those links in the follow-up email that you'll be getting this afternoon or tomorrow. So keep an eye out for that. And we hope you have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thank you, Hannah. And I want to thank all of you for joining us today, and wish you success in your business endeavor.